wants to have a uneducated mass base so that the only option for poor, desperate African Americans is the military. So they can go into the military because they are not aware, because they have no consciousness. These men and women will go into the military and kill you in a heartbeat. They have no consciousness.
Have no other choices.
But they have no choices, but they also have no consciousness. And there are always choices. There are always choices. In the worst of times, there are still choices. But, okay, obviously the government is imperialist, but if you think there's any awareness, your question at one point is, are these riots about imperialism? Oh, hell no. Sorry, excuse my French. I'm going to tell you the absolute truth. I have been to these marches. I have been to these events. There is very little awareness of imperialism or the government's role or our international agenda. I mean, many of these men and women who are burning down the houses and the homes and the shops of their brothers and sisters, of their African American brothers and sisters, have absolutely no awareness that there is an imperialist agenda.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Thank you. We're coming back to you again. Michael, we want to come back to you. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. And I carefully listened what the sister said. And look, I think we should go a little bit deeper into the whole subject. Number one, I fully agree that not everybody who is on the street has a clear anti-imperialist agenda. I do not want to compare the more or less spontaneous activities of the masses, the oppressed, with a clear agenda, with a clear development of for example, the Islamic Revolution in Iran or the Sandinista Revolution in Nicaragua, etc., etc. Of course, you can't compare this, but it's a matter of fact that in the United States, it's not a calm society. Everything goes well, as the propaganda says, and there are things on the ground, a lot of things very spontaneous, which are directed against the system. And who is producing racism? It's the system. It doesn't matter that you have a Afro-American origin president. That's not a thing. I know that you have soldiers who are Afro-American, who are of Chicano origin. They are fighting their brothers and sisters abroad. I was once nearly killed by a CIA hit team. And the leader of the CIA hit team was an Afro-American. So that's not the thing. The key thing is the system who produces exactly those problems that the people are facing and that we see in the television and that we have to recognize as a facts, showing and demonstrating the unhuman character of the United States system that's far away of being democratic, equal, or whatever.
No, I agree with that. United States sucks and everybody lives here knows it. But in terms of you don't understand how dumb people are here. Sorry, you don't understand how I'm a teacher. I have been a teacher for a decade. You don't understand that if people close their eyes, they don't know what continent United States is on. I mean, they don't.
My sister, I'm living in an imperialist country also. I know as well how dumb the people here in Europe are. In many prefer a lot of, consumer things, etc., etc. I would love that they take up arms, change their government, and join the liberation struggle of so many people in the world. Now in Yemen, their brothers and sisters in Yemen, I would love to do, but they don't do. So this is a matter of fact, and it's not only in the United States, but there are people who try to do their best. And just remember, my sister, when Shahid hero Che Guevara was in New York, and he was in Bronx, and the people were praising him as a great revolutionary leader, etc., etc. He said, no, I'm not a revolutionary leader. The people who are struggling in the belly of the beast, that's to say, in United States against the system, they're the heroes. I'm not the hero. This was exactly what Che Guevara said. So I think
Che Guevara was great, but trust me, we right now have a crisis of leadership. I have gone to the rallies, and you know what? If I even speak about American imperialism, I'm actually asked to not mention it. I have been to the rallies. I have asked to speak. I have spoken at a few. I have grabbed the microphone. I'm actually asked to not even mention American imperialism. This is, you're talking about an era that is gone. There is underground stuff going on. There's underground organizations going on. But in terms of the vast majority, most people here, okay, the Marxists who were doing all of the agitating about imperialism and stuff like that, they are pretty much impotent in this country. You know, they think they're great. All the Trotskyists and the Stalinists and all their different parties, they all boast about themselves, but in the movements they are almost nothing. They are absolutely nothing. The movements right now have a crisis of leadership. If in fact somebody were to emerge in the United States that was in fact a leader on the level of Malcolm X or Che Guevara, you would see some big changes. But right now, I cannot point to a single solitary leader in the Black movement, in the Chicano movement, in even the trade unions, in any of the movements that has any kind of clarity about what the nature of our government is and what our agenda is.
Teresa, you said that the reason of the protest are mostly economic issues. And economic issues in the U.S. is definitely the roots are in imperialism, the American imperialism. And there's no way that no one out there knows about the imperialism of the U.S. How come you say there is the crisis of leadership? How come is it possible that there's no one out there that knows about the imperialism?
Okay, because it's reduced down to simplicities. It's reduced down to white racism. And there's no distinction between Democratic Party, Republican Party, and Marxist, leftist, Muslims, Christians, Jews. You're all whiteys, okay? All of you, just whiteys. So it's reduced down to simplicities. You don't understand the lack of education here. I, honest to God, was told that, you know, don't get too political because it's just a racial fight. The Ferguson thing was 99% just a race fight. But at some point, it wasn't even a race fight because more of the businesses that were Black owned or Black run were burned down and attacked than the corporate businesses. The people here are not educated. In order to even understand what imperialism is, you have to have some level of education. In the American schools, you have kids graduating from high school who are functionally illiterate, who can't write. You have colleges actually failing students before they even apply for community colleges because they take a literacy test, and a huge percentage of the high school graduates can't pass a literacy test. The exit exam that I teach as a high school teacher in my country is at a beginning of high school students who can't pass a beginning 8th grade test.
So you have say that the system has reduced the minds of the people, so it can use it the way that it wants, right?
Exactly. Right. The main option for poor African Americans, poor whites, poor Latinos is the military. And they don't want to do a draft, because if they do a draft, God forbid they would have to draft rich white kids. So what they do is it's intentional impoverishment and intentional lack of education, so that they can build up the military forces and they can build up the pawns that can be killed off without any major loss to our government in their minds, in their racist minds. So you don't actually have awareness that it's imperialism. I mean, people can't even define what that means. The vast majority can't define what that means. I was a part of a coalition for Palestine, and I kept trying to tell them that United States and Israel's agenda was imperialistic, which is why they're going after Iran, which is why they invaded Iraq, which is why they were in Afghanistan. None of those countries had any reason to be invaded except for imperialism. And even in my coalition, where we had so-called leftists and trade unionists and stuff like that, none of our literature would use, none of the flyers would use the words imperialists. None of them. They wouldn't even say it.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much for clarifying. Here, at the moment, I would like to hear Tim Anderson's opinion. Tim, are you with us?
Thank you, Fatima. Yes, I've been listening there. I mean,
thank you.
Of course, Teresa's right that the political consciousness of people involved in the protests or the riots may be very limited, and that is linked to the levels of education and topics that are banned, really in the US and in my country too. But I think the good point about linking an imperial analysis here is that to try and understand the brutality of the racism in the US, which is quite extraordinary, the brutality of the police. I mean, very few police forces in the world are out on the streets they're really in paramilitary force. Some of them have tanks these days, armored personnel carriers. They have all sorts of weapons. That's not the way policing happens in most countries, including the countries that the US itself calls dictatorships. And so the question there is, why is this level of brutality within the US against their own people? There's been videos, apart from Ferguson, of teenagers being arrested by paramilitary police and brutalized, for talking back to police or something like that. And I think a lot of the answer to that is an imperial culture has to demonstrate a level of brutality with its own people that it uses against those overseas. It's the only way to understand it, really. I recall when President Clinton was first elected a couple of decades ago, as governor of his state, he was authorizing the execution of an intellectually disabled young person at that time. There's a sort of a blood ritual that seems to be associated with gaining public office in the US, which is to do with demonstrating their capacity to be a violent person. And so, for example, if we talk about violence generally in the United States, it's not just to do with the level of weapons, because there are other countries with the same level of weapons, like Canada and Switzerland and so on. But there is a culture, a very deep culture in the US of violence. And I think that's where an understanding of the imperialism of the US system and how it's used against their own people becomes important.
Thank you very much, Tim. Teresa, as an aware person, why do you think the police aren't persecuted or convicted appropriately after committing murder or killing the unarmed or innocent black people?
Because they're doing the job that the government wants them to do. It's one step away from military society. This is not a democratic society at all. This is a society of control. The whole issue is control. The whole issue is to suppress dissent, to suppress truth, and to instill fear in people. It's intentional fear mongering, and it is so that FEMA has built camps all over the country, but especially in the protests of the Vietnam War era, that they're prepared to corral protesters and put them into camps. This is an intentional agenda of control to prevent the democratic rights of people to actually uncover the truth, to act on the truth, and to stop their government from stealing their money, waging wars, and killing our sons and daughters.
Right. Thank you. Michael, I have a question from you.
Yep.
Thank you. How do you see the future of this issue? Will blacks end up in the same fate that happened to Native Americans?
I think everything is possible because, as I see it, we are now living in a very, very dangerous worldwide, not only in the United States but worldwide, in very dangerous situation in which every form of resistance, even if it's spontaneous, even if it is without any program, is completely suppressed by all means. Just look to Yemen, and look to the United States, and look to Germany even, where ugly things are happening. So there's the possibility that the Afro